to Cooper Talk.
Welcome to Cooper Talk. I'm your host, Steve Cooper, and remember, I'm only as hip as my guests. Let me tell you something, people. You know, there's a lot of hate going on these days, and it really surprises me. I go on Facebook, and I see people who just write such awful, awful stuff, and there are people that I sit there, and I thought I knew. I grew up with them. We grew up in a nice town in New Jersey. You know, I had left. I went to L.A. for a long time, and I came back, so I did live a little more, but it disappoints me a lot. And a group that is getting a lot of this hate are Asians. And that pisses me off because in college, my roommate, Bennett C. Lowe, was from Hong Kong. And I learned a lot about the culture. And he came over and brought some amazing music. I mean, in 1983, he got some of the best music. He brought us New Order, Roxy Music, stuff we never heard. But a lot of that's going on. And my guest today is a very popular rapper who actually has a single out called Anti, which is against it, and all about the hate and what we're going to do, and we're going to talk about that. And my guest is Latyrx Born. How you doing?
I'm good. Thank you, man. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
No problem. Now, you know, I was talking to Susie Nakamura. She's an actor, and she's been on the show before, and she said she didn't want to come back on until everything in her community had been taken care of. But for you, you really have come out, and you're trying to combat it with a single. But what kind of hate have you experienced, especially because in the rap world, you don't think of an Asian being a rapper?
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess a lot of people don't. I mean, I don't know. I can just tell you that, you know, the anti-Asian violence and sentiment is nothing new for us. You know, it's something that I've grown up with. It's a part of life as much as just rolling over in the middle of the night. You know, it never goes away. And I think, though, that what we're seeing has been a huge spike since COVID started in anti-Asian violence and anti-Asian sentiment. And I think it's news to a lot of people now because it's actually made the news, you know. But like I said, this is something that I've been dealing with it my entire life. And most of my family members, relatives have been dealing with it their entire lives. So if you really look at it, it's been going back for hundreds of years. It's funny. I got these kinds of calls. You know, people calling me up. Hey man, when did like my non-Asian friends are calling me up and they're like, when did all this anti-Asian violence start? Da da da. And I'm like, 200 years ago, man, 300. You know, but it's not until we started hearing things like the China virus or the Kung flu, you know, I mean, things that these little one-liners and these really racist catchphrases have entered the culture, you know, and they've entered the culture at the very top, you know, and so when you have people in national leadership normalizing this kind of speech and this kind of behavior, it all trickles down. And I mean, let's be real. These are things that if your coach or your teacher or your boss or a coworker were saying things like the China virus or the Kung flu, or, you know, saying these kinds of things in the workplace, in school, you know, in a team setting, that person would be fired. And it would be very hard for that person to get a new job, you know. But because it's entered the lexicon from the very top, it trickles down and it creates a really dangerous and tense environment where it's basically a free-for-all to say whatever you want to say and behave however you want to behave towards Asians and Asian Americans. And That's why we are seeing this in some cities 1,000-fold, and I'm not exaggerating here. This is documented. This is facts. 1,000-fold increase in anti-Asian incidents being recorded.
Now, you said you've heard it for years. Well, you've grown up and lived in a lot of different places, right?
Yeah.
So what was that like moving, and especially, as a young kid, and you've heard these slurs, what was it like from you moving? I know you raised in Salt Lake City. I don't know how that is with, whenever I think of that, I think of, bunch of white people. I mean, that's what we think about when you heard the Utah Jazz played basketball in Utah, you're like, there's no jazz in Utah, it's whatever.
Right.
But I mean,
right.
But so what was it like for you growing up as a kid? I mean, did you feel a lot of heat, like in a predominantly white area where you grew up? Did you get a lot of these slurs towards you when you were younger?
Well, just to be clear, I mean, I was born in Japan, and we moved to the United States when I was probably 1 or 2 years old. So I don't really have any recollection of growing up in a foreign country. We moved when I was an infant, and I lived in Salt Lake City from the time I was about 2 till the time I was about 6. So only about 5. So only about 4, maybe 4 years. And then from the age of 6 until now, I've lived in Berkeley, California. So I've spent the majority of my life in Berkeley. But I remember, just to give you an example, this is something we, as people of color and Asian Americans, this is something that we encounter and we begin to feel at a very early age. And I'll give you an example. I remember that when I was probably about preschool age, 3 or 4 years old, I remember going to daycare, like preschool. I was in preschool. This was before I even hit kindergarten. And I remember the lady that ran the preschool, okay, and at that time, the preschool was in this giant house. It was a huge house. And I remember one time she gave me a bath, which is something that you probably cannot do at this time, right? You cannot do this. But the headmaster, she gave me a bath, and she was like, "You're extremely dirty. We need to wash that off of you." That was my skin tone. That was my skin tone. And I just remember pretty much for the first 5 or 6 years of my life, even when I moved to Berkeley, spending extra time in the shower trying to wash the brown off of me. You know what I mean? You become indoctrinated at a very early age. I mean, I think I even said this in my bio. I mean, I was called chink, Jap, gook, nip, immigrant, slant eye, every day until I was probably 20. Every day, And it's like I say in the song, I mean, let's be transparent. This shit's been happening before the pandemic. Coming up, I heard chink so much, it was anthemic. Imagine what that's done to our self-image. It's just a part of daily life for us, as normal as brushing our teeth, And you can say it would be easy to assume, oh, well, it's because you grew up in a place that was, I don't know, culturally conservative or monocultural, you make the assumption maybe that because, those first few years were spent in Salt Lake City. But the rest of my life, I spent in one of the most celebrated, liberal communities in the United States of America. You know, so the point that I'm trying to make is that it happens everywhere. It happens everywhere.
Well, yeah, something an attack happened in Philadelphia, which Philadelphia is very, is a very diverse city, and it surprises you. You know, I mean, I remember, as I said, I mentioned my roommate from Hong Kong in college. I used to love going to dim sum with him because all the tourists would be there. We get towards the end, and he'd speak Cantonese, and we get the whole new tray of food because, and it was great, But Philadelphia had a very hip Chinatown area, and it happened there, and it surprises you. Now I got to ask you, you're a performer. I know you rap and you say I read, you said you're a good comedic actor. Well, I got to ask you because I was born, I'm legally blind to one eye, so I had a bit of a lazy eye. Years later, I did stand-up comedy for 10 years, and I think the reason was because of that insecurity and the pain you sort of felt getting made fun of. Do you think that's one of the reasons why that you went into the entertainment world as a release from the crap you heard when you were younger?
That is a great question. That is a great question. I think fundamentally I got involved. I got into showbiz because I'm an artist. I mean, just fundamentally, I'm an artist. But as I reflect on my life now, I see that this need that we have to be seen and to be heard probably did drive my career choice in a certain way. It probably did. And, I've always tried, whether it was funny or sad or tragic or traumatic or scary or hilarious, I've always tried to weave in my life experiences, Asian American or otherwise, into my music. Because I think, the responsibility that I feel to myself is to speak my truth, and sometimes that truth is painful, sometimes it's hilarious, sometimes it's distasteful, sometimes it's powerful nonetheless, so that's a great question. Could be, yeah.
Because we always think about that, because you have certain things, certain factors that you don't notice that until you get older. And then you sit there and go, oh yeah, a little sense. Now, tell me about the song Anti. Tell me when you decided to do it and what you're going to, the message you're conveying towards it. Tell me about how this whole song came up, and when you sat there and said, okay, the lyrics have to probably be on point, they have to be right, they can't be, you don't want them to be overly, I can't think of the word, sometimes people go overboard, but you want to make a message. When did you decide to write this and start doing this, and what was the process?
Well, so I'll just start by saying that, first of all, shout out to Cutso, who's not on the interview right now, but the song was made in collaboration with DJ Cutso, who I've worked with before. I did an album with him a couple of years ago called Rap Night. And, we collaborate with each other all the time. And he hit me about a month ago because he was doing a live stream benefit for Stop AAPI Hate, which is a charitable organization that is, helping to spread awareness against anti-Asian violence. And so he called me up. He's like, I'm doing this benefit live stream. Can you record a couple dub plates for me, just of some of your older songs, But then we got to talking about the issue, and in our conversation, we both had so much to say that we said to each other, what if we just did a whole new song? What if we recorded an original song for this? Because every Asian American at that point was well aware that it's on the street right now, depending on where you were, et cetera, et cetera. And so we decided to write a whole new song. And just to give you an idea, the song was conceived, written, recorded, produced, mixed, video shot, uploaded, purchase donation, Bandcamp campaign launched in 10 days.
Now, how long does it usually take for you to get a song together and to do all that? How long would it take you to shoot a video? 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month? How long usually?
At least a month.
Okay.
At least a month. But because everybody felt so passionately about this issue, everybody that we worked with to get this, to get the song done and get the video done and see it through all the steps, everybody was so galvanized around this issue. It just happened like that. And as far as the process of writing it, you know, these are not hard songs to write because there's a lifetime of material there. You know, there's a wealth of material there that I can pull from. In fact, I wrote too much. You know, I wrote too much. I had to lop the lyrics in half because those kinds of songs write themselves because it's something that, like I said, I mean, it's something that we experience so regularly that the material is just so readily available. Those songs are easy to write. I think I wrote that song in like 15 minutes, 20 minutes, you know, and that's just how it is, you know. And the thing of it is, that song, it could have been relevant a year ago. It could have been relevant 10 years ago. It's just that it resonates a lot more now because, like I said, it's in the news. It's in the mainstream consciousness to a degree. You know, people are aware of it. You and I are having this conversation. I didn't need to tell you that anti-Asian violence was a phenomenon. You already knew. You know, so what that tells me is that information is already out there. So it kind of cleared the runway for us to have these kinds of conversations and make these kinds of songs and have them resonate in a way that maybe wouldn't have 5 years ago, 10 years ago, even though the song would have been just as valid.
Now, because there's been a lot of hate, there's always been hate, but because it seems to be escalated, as you said, some places more than 1,000, you know, times. Do you get scared for your family? I mean, it's something that, you know, it's you know, I'll be honest, as a white person, I don't have to worry about that. I don't sit there and worry about, you know, well, my mom's 90. She's has Alzheimer's, so I'm, you know, don't worry about that. But, you know, I'm just saying she's not going to be walking down the street. If she is, I have more to worry about than, you know. But I've never had to worry about that. I mean, maybe if you're in the wrong neighborhood at the wrong time. But do you worry about your family? Because as you see in the news, I mean, there was that incident in San Francisco where the guy hit the lady. The lady hit him with the wood beat his ass, which was great. I think everyone was cheering for her, and she just kicked his ass. And that's when you sit there and probably people go, well, I better not mess around. But it seems, you know, it is happening in all ages and a lot of older people. Do you get scared for your family? Because you're someone who can probably take care of yourself. You look like you're in good shape. I mean, even though if there's 5 people, you're screwed. But do you sit there and when you go to sleep, do you worry about family and younger ones and older ones that you know?
Absolutely. Of course. Of course. And I think that's what's really shitty about this particular era that we're living through right now, is that not only, and I say it in anti, you know, not only do I have to worry about all the things that every American and person is worried about during COVID. Am I going to lose my job? Am I going to lose my house? Am I going to be evicted? What kind of toll is this taking on my mental health? What kind of toll is this taking on my relationships? Am I going to lose my assets? Oh, and by the way, there's this thing called COVID. I could pass from that shit. You know what I mean? So not only do I have to worry about all those things, now I have to worry about, am I going to get my ass kicked out on the street? Is my wife, is my son, when he goes back to school, whenever that is he going to get harassed by racist upperclassmen? I mean, I'm just quoting my song at this point, you know what I mean? But I have to worry about our elders, which, as you've seen, I mean, a lot of what's happening is directed towards senior citizens. A lot of what's happening is being directed toward Asian women, you know. So there's this extra blanket or two on the bed, you know. So I'm concerned. I'm worried, just like every other American is right now, about, you know, all the repercussions of just COVID in general, you know. But now I got to worry about, I could possibly die out there. Of course I'm worried about that. Of course that concerns me. Of course I'm fearful for my community, you know. And that's what's so devastating for us right now.
Now, you know, you're devastated, and, you know, everything happens like that, but you're a creator, and, you know, you did do Anti, but besides that, has this worry affected your creativity besides the song in a good way or a bad way? Like, I know sometimes if you're worried, it's harder. Sometimes it's easier to create. Sometimes it's harder to create. But what have you been going through with the creative process through COVID and through all this stuff that's coming to the forefront? How have you dealt with it, and are you using it as an outlet to inspire you more than going past just that one song?
Well, you know, I think for most artists, we use our art as an outlet for whatever we're feeling, you know, at a given time or a given moment. I think, you know, as a guy who's been in therapy, you know, for years now, one of the things that I was always advised to do is journal. And, you know, no matter what you're going through, just so you can get it out of your head. You get it out of your head, you put it on paper, or, you know, in my case, as an artist, as a rapper, as a musician, I get it out of my head and I put it down on tape, as we say. You know, my journals are my albums. My journals are my songs. And so in that respect, I'm able to therapeutically channel how I feel and what I'm going through via music. And then however it finds itself out in the world is how it finds itself, and where it lands is where it lands. I mean, I don't really have much control over that process once it sort of is out there in the ether. You know what I mean?
Right.
But to answer your question, I would say that's all I've ever done. That's all I've ever done, is take these thoughts, these feelings, these emotions, these experiences, compile them into words and songs and sound, and create art with it.
Now, when did you find out you were an artist? Like for me, when I did stand-up, when I was a kid, I remember I went to the record store and I found a Lenny Bruce album. And I remember my brother would listen to Cheech and Chong, the Wedding album, and I would just crack up, man. And that shit would make me laugh. And then I came home with the Toledo Window Box album by Callin. Now, my parents had no idea what a Toledo Window Box was. And if they were, they would have been like, what? Steven's listening to people talk about smoking pot? I mean, they had no clue. They were clueless. But that's what spurred me. And also, I mean, I could never play a musical instrument, but I've always loved music. But as a little kid, were you attracted to music, or were you attracted to sports? Or what made you groove and then start to follow this career you've had, which has been a very long and successful career?
That's a great question. I think for myself, you know, even as a child, very, very young, you know, 5, 6 years old, I knew I wanted to be an artist. You know, I grew up, my father was a writer, so I saw his process firsthand. I saw the lifestyle that he lived, and, you know, the commitment that he had, and, you know, what it took to achieve that. To achieve that, and so I was familiar with those aspects of being an artist from a very early age. It wasn't until I heard hip hop for the first time in maybe kindergarten or first grade or second grade, somewhere in there, that I said, "Oh, okay." It was instant. It was like, boom. Okay, I knew I always wanted to be an artist. Now I know exactly what kind of artist I want to be. You know, as soon as I heard that, as soon as I heard the Sugar Hill Gang, it was like, as a first grader, I was like, that's it for me. I know exactly what my destiny is. I know what my path forward is. And then that was it, man. The ship took off.
What was it that did that to you? I mean, it's funny because I've been talking to a lot of musicians this week who are older, like Little Steven and, Gary Newman and different people. And they all, for them, it was the Beatles. But they saw the Beatles on TV, and it was just when they looked and said, oh, wow, look at those guys. The women love them. They're all dapper. They're Ed Sullivan Show. That's what did it. But for you, and there wasn't, back then there wasn't, MTV was on, but MTV wasn't playing. If people weren't playing a lot of rap videos, you might see Run DMC, you might see something. But it was it the beat that attracted you, or you just went, because there's thousands of things we can hear in music. Why did Randy Rhoads play metal? Why did so and such? But was it something about, that song that just the beat that you said, this is different, man. This is really cool. I can really relate to this.
I'll tell you exactly what it was. It was when you talk about like Little Steven seeing the Beatles for the first time, right? They saw these things. For me, it was what we weren't seeing. It was what we weren't hearing. When I turned on the radio, it was like, Bonnie Tyler, Total Eclipse of the Heart, or Springsteen, or, respect to all those artists. That's great. But I just remember feeling, even at that age, that a lot of the stuff that I was hearing on the radio was not speaking to me. It was not speaking to my experience. It was not speaking to me culturally. And when I heard Sugar Hill Gang for the first time, it was like, wow, this is unlike anything I have ever heard in my entire life. And you got to understand, I was coming from Salt Lake City. I was like a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old coming from Salt Lake City, And so, fresh from so the era that I'm talking about that was happening in music. And I'll tell you the other key thing was that before I even heard the actual song Rapper's Delight, before I even heard the actual song, I knew all the words to the song. Why? Because the kids on the schoolyard were singing it over and over and over again. And they would, all the kids, when I was just new to school in Berkeley, the kids would finish each other's sentences. Hip, hop, hippie to the hip, I am wonder. And they would trade off. And then the song would just continue through like 10 kids. And the fact that children could do this, it made it instantly accessible for me. It was like, oh shit, I can do this. I don't have to take piano lessons. I don't have to take voice lessons. I don't have to learn how to play guitar, Anybody could. It just felt so accessible. It felt so welcoming. And you got to understand, like I said, even early on, I knew I was on the outside. I knew I was on the outside, and so to hear, or I felt like an outsider. So to hear this music for the first time in a world where you didn't hear or see anything like it, and have it be so accessible and easy to participate in as a child, that's what drew me to it instantly.
Well, it drew you to it, and it's funny because, you're in first grade. In first grade, I think I wanted to be a sportscaster. I wanted to be a fireman. I wanted, you had this thing. Now, when do you start pursuing it? When do you sit there? It's one thing to say, oh, you're in first grade. When it's not like we're lyricists in first grade. It's not like, what do we, you hear first graders jokes. They're like, what the hell is that? But when did you start really pursuing it and saying, you know what, this is what I'm going to do? Because to get into the arts is tough as it is, and to sit there as a very young, you were dreaming, but when did you start creating your own raps? How old were you when you started sitting there and rapping in the schoolyard was it gradually after that, or did you push it? Did you put it away in the back of your mind for a while, and then later go, shit, this is what I want to do?
So I think when I, third, fourth, fifth grade, I was just sort of a bedroom rapper. Like me and my friends, we would write these raps. By that point, like Run DMC was super popular. Fat Boys were super popular. I was probably in elementary school at that time. And I would write these raps and whatever. They weren't that serious. They weren't that good. I wasn't really recording anything. I didn't really start writing and recording seriously until probably freshman year of high school at Berkeley High. And every day after school, a lot of kids might go to football practice, or they might go to baseball practice, or they might go to, this club or that club. Well, I went to a local producer's house named Onion, and we went to his basement studio in his parents' house. He was also, shout to John Watson, he was a producer at Berkeley High, who actually later on, a lot of local celebrities went through there and recorded, because he was one of the few guys in the area that had a producer. I went to his house every day after school, and we would make beats, and he had a drum machine, and he had a lot of records, and we would talk about music, and other guys would come through, and I was the youngest of everybody, and so I could see, I had all these mentors, and that's when I got serious about it. It was at the Onion Lab, as it was called, in the 9th grade, and that's where I got serious about it. But then, things didn't go so well for me at Berkeley High, and I had to leave, and I sort of lost touch with Onion and those guys, because I was suddenly going to a new school in Oakland, and I sort of lost touch of the dream. I lost touch of not with the music. I was still a huge aficionado and fan. I bought every record that came out every week, on cassette at that time, you know what I mean? And then, but I never stopped thinking about it. And it wasn't until, a few years later when I got to college, I got to UC Davis, and I met what would be the Soul Sides crew, which later became Quannum Projects. It's where I met Black Alicious. It's where I met DJ Shadow. It's where I met Jeff Chang. It's where I met Joseph Patel. These guys have all gone on, obviously, to be successful artists in their own right, And we formed a record label called Soul Sides, like I said, which later became Quannum. And I essentially went pro in 1993 with a song called Send Them. At that time, I was called Asia Born. And I wrote the record I wrote the song and recorded the song when I was 18. And it came out, we pressed up the records. We all pooled and chipped in our money, and, we were living in the dorms and with our parents, and we all chipped in and made those records ourselves. And that came out in 1993 when I was 20 years old. It was recorded at Dan the Automator's basement studio at his mother's house back when he lived at home. And shout to Dan, shout to the whole squad. And here I am now, almost 30 years later, 15 albums deep.
Now, what was the scene like back then? What was, because it's not like the rap scene was huge. I mean, it was big, but New York, LA were really popping, and you see that Detroit had some action going, and Atlanta did. But what was it like? And when you hit the scene, were you guys just recording your your albums, or were you actually doing live events?
Both, yeah. But I mean, hip hop, for the most part, hip hop was still very underground at that time. And when I say underground, I just mean to say that there weren't a lot, in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, there weren't a lot of groups or artists in hip hop that were getting played on the mainstream. They weren't getting played on commercial radio. It's not like now. It's really hard to explain that to people now. There was no internet, you know. There was no Spotify. There was no social media. So everything filtered through record labels, whether independent or major. And it was still, it felt very underground. You know, it doesn't mean that artists didn't have deals or contracts with major labels. It just meant that those albums, there was never any real expectation for those albums to go platinum or double platinum or get played on commercial radio alongside who were some big artists at the time, like Whitney Houston, or alongside, you know, CNC Music Factory, or what, you know, we didn't expect that to happen necessarily. So in that sense, it was a really underground phenomenon. There were a lot of independent record labels, and it was a great time. I remember it being very difficult. You know, I remember it being a very difficult time, but a lot of great music came out at that time.
Now, at what point do you start breaking into more of a commercial standard where it's not underground? What was that for you? What was that one break, per se, that really put you on the track? And it's like anything. If you're underground, you're doing stuff, it's awesome. But if you're sitting there at the end of the day and you're not getting that appeal, it can be a little bit of a downer. Even though if you love the art, you sit there and go, well, wait, I'm saying something. I want people to hear it. When was your breakthrough moment in your eyes?
I think for me, like I said, I put out my first record in 1993. And then, you know, I was still in college at the time. I mean, I was sophomore or junior in college. And after I graduated, I did a couple albums with Latif, the True Speaker. We did the group was called Latyrx. So we did a couple albums there. The first album that you see behind me, this red and gray one. And then we toured. We toured the United States a few times. We toured Europe a few times. We toured Australia a few times. And then fast forward 10 years later, I made this album later that day. That was my first solo album. And that was the breakthrough moment with me. For me, I think Callin' Out was released. Callin' Out went to number 1 on commercial radio, not college radio, which is the kind of play that we were shooting for in the past. You know, that was really all we aspired to be, was on the college radio charts at the time, back when college radio was a big thing and really influential. And from there, that just changed the trajectory of my whole career. From suddenly the tours got bigger, the venues got larger, we started selling lots of records. We started getting a lot of licenses, which didn't really happen for hip hop at the time. When I say licenses, I mean my music started to get widely used in commercials and TV and movies, and all that is pretty common now, but back then it was unheard of, you know, especially for independent hip hop artists.
Now, what's it like when you're hearing your songs on commercials and stuff like that? I mean, I always think, you know, I go to the supermarket and they play a lot of AIDS with some of the guys that are in a band out of Philly called the Hooters that have became big. But I always think, you know, I'm pretty friends with David, the drummer. I always think, what's he think when he's, you know, going through the supermarket and he hears, you know, Day by Day or one of their songs? You know, do you sit there and go, oh, like for you, when you hear your song on a commercial, I mean, besides saying dollar signs, what do you, what goes through your mind? Do you sit there and go, wow, that's me? Or after a while you to go, again, I mean, how does it, like, what do you go through as an artist?
To me, I mean, it makes me really proud. I mean, because I remember what it was like when there was no hip hop on the radio, when there were no hip hop videos being played on TV. I mean, there was one show I remember, if you didn't have cable, like we never had cable when I was a kid, so we relied on this show when I was very small called Friday Night Videos. It was one show. Remember Friday Night Videos? It was on NBC or Channel 4, you know what I mean? And it came on at midnight on Friday for 1 hour. And I remember they played one rap video once. I think it was like Run DMC or somebody. And I heard it from the other room. You know, we would stay up until midnight on Friday when I was a kid just to watch Friday Night Videos, to see music videos once a week. And I think I heard Run DMC, and I ran into the room and watched it on my black and white TV, you know what I mean? Or my, you know, my little, tiny little color TV or whatever it was. You know, I was probably 8, 9, you know, 9, something like that. And that was just such a huge moment for me. You know, it just meant so much. Just that little 2 minutes of redemption all week long that you had waited for, praying that they would play some music that you loved, you know. To go from that to where we are now, where I'm in Trader Joe's or I'm in Chipotle and I can hear my songs, you know, I mean, we've come a long way, and it's beautiful. It makes me so proud, you know, that I not only am around to experience that moment, but in some small part, I've played a role in that.
Now, when was the first time you remember hearing yourself on commercial radio? Not college radio, but because there's a difference. I mean, college radio always went for the indie, the different sounds, but commercial radio is like when you're driving in your car. And I always love the stories of people, they always remember. Do you remember when the first time you heard yourself on commercial radio?
The first time I heard myself on commercial radio was a song called Balcony Beach. And it came out in 1996 or 1997. Again, just an independent 12-inch. And they played it on the Beat in LA, which is the biggest hip hop station in LA. And shout to Julio G, who at the time broke the record, and I believe her name was Mariama, who broke the record. It was huge. I mean, we had no promotional budget, we had no power, we had no machine behind us. You know, and so to hear that record being played alongside, you know, Snoop or, you know, Bone Thugs and Harmony at the time, who were huge multi-platinum groups, obviously, it was a big deal for me. It was a big deal, you know, and I just remember, you know, I was driving in my little 2-door fucked up Honda Accord, you know, with the dents on the side and the expired tags and just bags of empty Jack in the Box in the back seat, you know what I mean? And I'm just speakers falling out of the door, you know what I mean? Hearing my song on the radio and just being like, wow, this is really special. This is really, really special.
Now, as you're getting bigger, as you said, you start getting commercial. How does your life change? You know, do you sit there and do you go buy a new car right away because you knew the struggles as an artist? Because most people do. You know, you know, as everyone always says, oh, he's an overnight success when the person's been doing it for 10 or 15 years. And people don't know that. Like, well, wait a second. Lyrics born. He's came out of nowhere. Well, no, he was rapping in college. So it's, you know, he's been around. But what were some of the luxuries when you started making money that you afforded to treat yourself? Which a lot of artists don't treat themselves. They go, oh, this might not last.
Yeah, I got a little crazy, man. I got a little too crazy. You know, I went out, I bought a nice, fancy European car. You know, I bought a drop top 1968 Cadillac Coupe de Ville. You know, just way too many pairs of sneakers. You know, just let's go sofa shopping. I didn't even have room. You know what I mean? I did a lot of stupid shit. You know, I did a lot of stupid shit because, you know, and I just remember thinking at the time, it was like, I worked 20 years to get to this point. You know what I mean? Like, it had been 15 years from when I started making records till I actually started making a good living. 15 years, you know. And so I was like, fuck it, I'm going to buy a car or two. I'm going to do all the things that rappers do, you know what I mean? And I came to find out that that was not a smart move. You know, I came to find out that long term that was not a smart move, you know. But I'm glad I learned early. Glad I learned early.
Now, what was it like for you as the crowd started getting bigger as a performer? You know, it's something that, you know, you always think, oh, a big crowd's going to be great. Then all of a sudden you look out and you're used to playing this many and you see all these people and you go, holy shit, what if they don't like me? I mean, we all think that. I don't care who you are. You can be the biggest star. You always think, when I used to do stand-up, I think, okay, I'm going to a show. Will there be people there? It's a weeknight at a bar. Will there be people there? And if they're there, will they like me? What was it like for you growing as a performer as the crowds got bigger? Did that feed you in the beginning, or were you a little more timid in the beginning?
No, I loved it. I mean, for me, the bigger the better. You know, that's how I've always felt. I mean, as a performer, it's the more energy you have in the room, the easier my job is, you know, to be completely honest. So I loved it. I love playing in front of huge crowds. I love playing, you know, big clubs, big theaters, festival stages, you know, if thousands of people in front of me, put me in front of them, man, you know, let's do it. I love it. I love playing big crowds. And that was always the goal. And so when it happened, I was ready, you know. I live for that.
Now, you said you found out you shouldn't be spending all this money. When did you feel like you matured as an artist? Because, you know, it's something that you're spending that money, you're not maturing, but you're treating yourself, which it should be done. But then there's also excess. You know, when you sit there and go, I'm spending too much. When did you find out that you did that? Was it an accountant come to you and say, hey, listen, man, you're just spending too much damn money and the records aren't, you know, you're making money, but you're not making that much money?
Well, for me, it was, you know, when you are making a lot of money, you think it'll never end and you think it'll never change. And I think with most artists, what happens is, you know, when you look at the arc of most artists' careers, if they're lucky enough to get to the point where they do pop and it's this huge explosion and you're in this white, I think I heard Jay-Z call it the white hot space, you know, where you can just do no wrong, you know what I mean? And everything you touch is just magic and everything is just, every song you put out gets licensed and every song is well received and you're sort of in this zone, you know. That dissipates at some point. You know, the fervor, the sort of the initial enthusiasm from the crowd, and that, it dies down. You know, it dies down, and then you start to realize that you're on a wheel, you know, and you occupy a slot as far as that white hot space is concerned. And then that wheel turns, and then it makes room for somebody else, you know. And I didn't realize that at the time. I didn't realize that that white hot space does not last forever. You know, you want to be ultimately in your life in a place where you're somewhere in between hot and warm. You know what I mean? So that you can continue to simmer for the rest of your career. You know what I mean? I'm going to start using a lot of cooking analogies now, where you can just, you know, you can put it on simmer and stay, you know, bubbling for the rest of your career, you know, because life is long. You know, life is long and it's short, but it's as long as you choose it to be, you know, as far as your career is concerned, you know. And I made the choice finally once I saw the valley. I had hit the peak and then I saw the valley. It was like, oh, longevity is not about how much you spend. It's about how much you reinvest, you know. And that's when I started to make some decisions about my career that, okay, I think what I need to do here is I need to increase the frequency of my output, in terms of I need to put out albums more often, because the world was also changing. The world was starting to accelerate with the internet, and fans were starting to cycle through albums faster. There was more content out there to compete. So I need to change the way that I make albums. I need to make them with more frequency. I need to be more active on social media. I need to tour differently. And the money that I do make, I need to reinvest in my career and simultaneously reinvest in other things outside of the music business, things that aren't as volatile. You know what I mean? And once I kind of made those decisions, it served me a lot better than having all my eggs in the rap basket, spending all my money on shit that doesn't appreciate. You know what I mean? And I'm in a much better place now as an adult.
Now, when did you change your name to Latyrx Born? It was Asian Born originally, right? When did you change that, and why did you? Was it just something that you didn't? I mean, why did you do it?
So I changed. So I came out as Asia Born, and then I changed it probably in 1993. And then I changed. Latyrx Born was always kind of a nickname. Rappers have a billion alter egos and nicknames. So I changed. I'm no different, man. So, I changed it officially to Latyrx Born, I think in 94 or 95. And because what I really did not like was when I started to see press coming out, when my records were coming out, and they would talk about us, and they would talk about Quannum, and they would talk about the Soul Sides crew, Oh, he's pretty good for an Asian guy. The Asian, Oh, I like the Oriental. Oriental was still a word back then. You know what I mean? Oh, the Oriental guy's great. Wow, I didn't know Orientals could rap. I didn't know Asians could rap. I didn't like that. I didn't like that at all. And then I also realized that we are such a big, huge, diverse, beautiful group that no one person can capture the experiences or represent that accurately to the rest of the world. I'm representative of a group. My experiences as a Japanese American man are different than the experiences of a Vietnamese man, a Laotian woman, a Hmong grandmother, a Mien auntie, your Korean uncle. We're just so diverse. Our histories, our backgrounds, our experiences, and that complexity, that beauty, that needed to be represented accurately.
Now, do you consider yourself a role model because you're Asian and you've been successful in rapping? It's like, look at tennis. When the Williams sister hit it, all of a sudden you saw tennis in Compton. You didn't see it. You didn't see it in certain areas. People, pursuing it because they didn't know they could attain something. For you, do you consider yourself a role model because younger Asian men who have wanted to rap and have only thought that it was mostly African American? Oh, well, there's one white guy, Eminem, and there's Vanilla Ice, but he's not a rapper. He's just a goofball. Do you consider yourself inside somewhat of a role model, and do people come to you and say, hey, thanks, man. You made me know that I could do this?
I hope I'm inspiring. I hope to inspire. That's how I feel. I hope to be inspirational. I hope that I succeed in doing that with my work, and my stories. I don't know. I think role model is such an 80s term. You know what I mean? I think that as we grow, I always view people as stories. What can I pull from this story that was inspiring? What can I pull from this story as a cautionary tale? What can I pull from this person and this person's story as a marker to add to my own personal roadmap on my own personal journey? You know, what can I pull from this person's story so that I don't make the same mistakes? How did this person achieve that? What was that story? How can I incorporate that into my own? That's how I see things. I mean, I think role model, I don't even know if I haven't heard that phrase in a long time, and I don't know if I really use it, but I do say that I do hope to be inspiring, you know, in some small way.
Now, the acting, are you going to pursue that at all? I saw you've got the little, you know, the acting bug, and once you're on set, you know, it's like, oh, you know, of course people don't know that, you know, being on set can be boring as shit because you sit around all day and like, okay, wait, come in this way, but come in this. Or did you plan to pursue act? Is that something that you plan in your future to sit there and go, I really want to act more? Or is that something that will be somewhat of a hobby to you because you have your other career going?
No, I mean, I think it's all part of the same career, to be honest. You know, I mean, I don't, these are all sort of different sides to the same Rubik's Cube. You know what I mean? In my opinion, I don't see acting as any different than rapping. It's just another, or music. It's just another outlet of expression for me. And yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I had a great run of movies, you know, prior to COVID. We're talking about a couple others right now, which I'm really excited about. And I can't wait, man. I love it. And it's just so fun for me, you know, and that really is what drives me at this point. You know, it has to feel fun. In order for me to do something, it has to feel fun and it has to feel fulfilling, you know.
Now, what's your future for this year? What for the next year, 2 years? What is your game plan? Because you're an intelligent guy, so you probably have the drawing out, like, you know, because you've been in the business for a long time, so you know you've been through the ups and downs. So you always do that long cat. We all become businessmen. That projecting. What is, you know, the long term? What is your forecast for the next 2 years?
Well, I have 4 albums on deck. So two of them are finished now. The album that the new song right now, is part of an album called Mobile Homies. It's a collaborative album between me and 12 other artists. So it's myself and Prince Paul, the legendary producer. It's myself and Dan the Automator in Randall Park. It's myself and Cutso, obviously. Myself and Grouch and Eli. Myself and Black Alicious, myself and Tune Yards, myself and UTK, Litkarsh, myself and Combrio. I mean, so that's the next project. I have an acoustic album that's in the can. So we went into the studio and we did acoustic versions of a lot of my big songs. You know, there's 2 new proper Lyrics Born albums that I'm completing right now. I'll be in New Orleans recording for most of June. And then Cutso and I are working on a new Rap Night album. So that's what's happening music-wise. Acting and film-wise, I can't tell you just yet. You know, those things are happening, but they're in development right now. But things are moving on that front as well. So I'm excited, man. Mobile Home Recordings, my label, was kicking. You know, got 25 titles in a small catalog, you know, but it's growing every day, and I'm really proud of that. And on it goes, man.
Well, that's awesome. I want to thank you for talking to me. Give your social media, give all your social media stuff where the people can find you.
Yeah, I'm on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok at Lyrics Born. Hit me up.
Joe, people,
come see about me.
Go check him out, people. Go check him out, his music. Listen to it. You can find it. Listen to it. Always listen to music. You got to listen to live music and every kind of music. So anyway, follow Lyrics Born. Follow me. My website is coopertalk.net. You can find over 850 episodes. Email me, cooper@coopertalk.net. Twitter @coopertalk. Instagram @coopertalk1. Remember, I'm Steve Cooper. I'm only as hip as my guests. Don't forget, drink your water, eat your vegetables, take your vitamins. I'll talk to you guys next time.